Hi, welcome to this edition of Lunchtime Chat. My name is Debbie Prue. I'm the Executive Director over at NAMI Pasco.
And I'm Natasha Pierre, the Vice President of NAMI Hillsborough. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. Today we're going to be talking to Denise. Denise is the mom of a now adult who, as a child, had experienced a mental health condition. I know Denise and her daughter's story very well, so I invited her to share with us because I think her story has the power to offer so many hope. Denise, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and when you first started to notice that something just wasn't right with your daughter's mental health?
Yeah, so I have three daughters, and it's my youngest daughter, who is now an adult, who had the issues, and it still does, but I'd say when she was about 3 or 4 years old is when it started maybe manifesting, I guess. Just in small issues, not things that you'd ever notice. You think, oh, it's just behavior. Oh, it's just the third child. Oh, acting out. But probably by the time she was about between 4 and 5 is when it was really, you knew it was just more than just behavior, acting out, trying to get attention. And at that point, I had her tested at Children's Hospital up in Boston to see what was going on.
And what was the diagnosis at that young age?
Well, it's funny. They never really gave her a diagnosis then. They didn't want to say ADD. They didn't want to say depression. They just didn't want to put a label on it. And I think that was honestly a protective measure. A lot of diagnoses I've found out, as I've learned through the years, once a diagnosis is put, it stays and it can't come off. Most diagnoses, such as bipolar and things like that, there's no cure, so to speak, so it stays on the record forever. And so I believe at the time that was maybe just a proactive healthcare environment trying to, make sure before they actually put a label on it. So it took until probably 13 or 14 before anyone would even dare to put any names on anything. And at that point, 13, 14, when we clicked with the counsel that helped my daughter the most, she wouldn't put a label of bipolar on it, again, because it sticks. Depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder is what was actually put on paper.
Okay, and what were some of the complications you experienced while trying to seek treatment?
Oh, boy, that's a loaded question. Even back then, so she's 21 now, so you can figure out how many years ago, even back then, there just wasn't enough professionals. There still isn't. I think everybody knows that's probably even worse now because the ones that were there get burned out, and the new ones, they try to come in, and we all know things, pays low and stuff like that. But yeah, for the most part, it was just, learning as you go. It's like motherhood, first time mother, even though this was my third daughter, you learn as you go. You have to learn the system. You have to learn your rights. It's a lot of work. It's a job, second job.
Can you tell us about any stigma, or even question is, did you encounter any stigma from friends, family, who really didn't understand what you were going through with your child?
Yeah, absolutely. Even, I was divorced at the time. He had a hard time with it. The stigmas are everywhere. People kind of back off. One of my aunts later, after, had told me, I used to be afraid to say no to my daughter, just because of reactions. And I said, well, no, we have to say no. But the stigma, that's a good thing to bring up, because I used to be embarrassed at the very beginning, and as time went on, I said to myself, no, there's no reason for anyone to be embarrassed. It is what it is. Nobody chooses to be mentally ill. It's not a choice. Nobody's saying, oh, I'm just gonna, totally mess up my life today and see how many people I can make miserable. That's not what's going on. And once I got over that, the stigma was gone, and I became fairly outspoken in the sense that if I had any friends that needed help, I made sure that they knew. I would tell them everything I went through, every resource that I had in my little book of tricks, any mental health hospital that they needed to consider for somebody in their family. I would give them my review of it because I dealt with many of them.
And can you tell us about the darkest days of your daughter's illness? What did that look like?
Well, yeah, I mean, part of hers, there were a couple of suicide attempts, and one of those was absolutely the darkest. Even though in hindsight, I could say it was more a cry for attention, it doesn't matter, because if they cross the line, they cross the line. It could be for attention and they screw up the attention. And I'm sure that happens. I'm sure it really does. And that's how a lot of suicides end up being successful, not intentionally, but, and there was, there was one day, one of the first times I had to drop her off at a mental health hospital. That was pretty, I didn't know what was going to happen. You hear horrible things. It ended up being one of the best mental health facilities up north in Massachusetts, but I didn't know that at the time.
And so with your daughter, how bad did it get for her? I know you mentioned suicide attempts. Was she always living with you during this time?
She kind of went back and forth between me and her dad. It was more with me. And her, kind of putting with the darkest moments and her, 2 attempts. The one great counselor that she had, also would see me on the days that Evan would refuse to go. I would go and she'd talk to me. And, at some points, she actually prepared me for if I lost my daughter.
And what was it like for you as a mom? What were you experiencing?
It was, I mean, to say it was tough seems like an understatement, but it was really hard because I was the mom. I was supposed to fix everything. I wasn't allowed to give up and say no. You're not allowed to do that when you're a mom. And I certainly wanted to a few times, but I never did. Fortunately, one of my saving graces is my mom, because my mom did grow up with some mental illness, and she's the only one who truly got my daughter. She was the only one that would truly always be the other one that was always there besides me, that never gave up, never put a stigma on anything. So at least I had that.
Absolutely. I'm sure that there are other parents that will be watching this. What is, in your opinion, one of the misconceptions about parents who have a child with a mental illness?
Well, I think one of the big misconceptions is people think that the parent is lazy, or that the parent did something wrong, I guess, is more the point. The parent wasn't tough enough. The parent didn't set limits. Like I said, I have 3 daughters, and my kids now as adults can tell you the stories about the stuff that the youngest one, the extra limits that she had, the extra parenting. They probably, I don't know if I wouldn't say they got jealous at times, but, I think it was noticeable but the thing is, I always remember something that the director, I don't know if you all know, you probably don't, there's a school up in Massachusetts for kids with all kinds of mental disabilities, physical disabilities, and I happened to work there for a year. And the director, in one of his little talks with the staff, said that every kid is different. He said, just because you have 3 children and one of them needs a new winter coat doesn't mean all 3 of them need a new winter coat. And that always stuck with me. Just because one of them needs counseling doesn't mean 3 of them does. Just because one of them needs a glass of water doesn't mean 3 of them does. You have to treat each one as an individual and give that child what they need.
Okay. Now, I know the story, so I know that there's this big turnaround that happened. Can you tell us about that?
Well, it took a long time. It was very, maybe insidious is the word. So as my daughter got a little older, she had some really the mid-teenage years were the worst. She did kind of ran away at one point, but we didn't know she ran away. We thought that maybe she was abducted. It was just a really bad 4 or 5 days in our lives. We thought she was dead. We just didn't know. And she came back from that. We thought it might be better, but it wasn't. She ended up cohabitating with an abuser for several years, and there was nothing that we could do to pull her out of that. She only had to do it herself. So 16, 17, 18, she's 21 now, and it's only been in the past 18 months. Much accolades to her oldest sister, who's been really helping her along the way. She helped her get a job in the healthcare profession. So she's actually working as a certified nurse's aide, helping other people now. She's getting there. She's really come a long way, and it's amazing. And if you told me right now in 2020, if you told me this 4 years ago, I would have just walked away and said, you're crazy. That there's no way, it's not going to happen. But it is happening. It's just such a long process.
Now, from the outside looking in as a mom, what tools, resources, treatment, pathways that your daughter used were most helpful to getting her to this point today?
I know for a fact that one of the tools that she learned in different facilities that was the most helpful to her is journaling. I mean, that's just something that really works for her. She's always probably still does it. I mean, it's her own personal thing. That's not something I would ever violate. And I always tell people, you never touch anyone else's journal. That's been a huge thing for her. Medication, off and on when she was younger, antidepressants and certain things, but she's not using any medications now. I've encouraged her that maybe she needs to consider something, but she's 21, so that's her decision now. But the main thing, honestly, is the journaling. That's since she was probably 10 years old or younger. That's always been encouraged to her by different healthcare providers.
Okay, and I have one last question for you. For all our parents that are going to watch this, what advice would you give them when they're facing this dark hole and they feel like there is no hope for their child?
Well, because I know that feeling, I would say, as hard as it is, you just have to hang on, even if you have to walk away. Look up the definition of tough love, because it's part of it. I know tough love is used for substance abuse situations as well, but it's also for mental health situations. You have to take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of somebody else. And I think that's a really important lesson that I learned along the way with the help of my mom. She helped me learn that lesson. You're no good if you're no good to somebody else, if you're just, mentally exhausted and spent and you can't function. So you have to take care of yourself.
All right. Denise, I want to thank you for being here with us today. And I know that this story is going to offer so many some hope, because when you're in this situation, it's really hard to see a way out.
It's true. You know that.
I do. I know that well. Again, thank you for being here with us. And for anybody watching, thank you for joining us today. And be sure to join us on the next episode of Lunchtime Chat. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.